Older women aren't aging out. We're powering up. That's the message today, and brands should want in on that ride. Today, we're talking about a group that brands chronically underserve, even though they drive massive spend and influence. I'm talking about women ages 45 plus. My guest is Sharon Macey, content creator, speaker, blogger, and host of Mom to More, a top 3% global podcast spotlighting moms in reinvention. Before her 20 years as a stay-at-home mom, Sharon was an award-winning copywriter and marketing strategist. Now, she's on a mission to show how motherhood is not a pause on growth. It's a masterclass in leadership, creativity, adaptability, and resilience. In this episode, Sharon and I get real about why midlife women are still misrepresented or invisible in brand marketing, the lazy stereotypes that you need to retire, and what authentic representation actually looks like, how to show up as a partner during those reinvention moments. Here's a huge opportunity, guys. I'm talking about the empty nest phase, caregiving, career pivots, menopause. Brands that are doing it well and what you can borrow today, along with fitness and vitality and kind of that real why behind strength training in midlife and how to message function, energy, and joy instead of fear. So if your product lives anywhere that moms influence, this conversation is going to sharpen your strategy and your empathy. Welcome to Marketing with Empathy, the show for brands who want to win the hearts and carts of today's busy families and earn a trusted spot in their homes. I'm your host, Sarah Panus, and I have over 20 years of content marketing experience helping brands drive leads and sales. And I've worked with tons of brands from huge household names like Sleep Number and American Express and Nestle Waters, including numerous small and medium-sized businesses, which is the bread and butter of who I love helping these days in my consulting business. So join me here as I share ideas, stories, and strategies to help you grow and attract leads and sales. And thanks to your support, this show is a top 5% show and a member of the Marketing Podcast Network. So let's hear from today's sponsors and then jump right into my discussion with Sharon Macey around what we should be thinking about and the opportunities you have as a brand to connect and sell to women aged 45 plus. Hey, and welcome back. Sharon, I want to start with the big picture, which is why do you think that women over the age of 45, despite holding so much purchasing power, why do you think they're still so often overlooked or maybe misrepresented in mainstream brand marketing?
Twofold: stereotypes that persist, even though they shouldn't, and really not being educated on who we are now. I think brands just don't understand, even though they should, all that we are capable of, and that women of a certain age, I'll qualify it as that, are really wrongly and unfairly considered old. But in my opinion, that was like my parents and my grandparents' generation. That is not the generation of the women that I know. And I think brands should start portraying us as the empowered and vibrant and financially secure decision makers that we really are. And I'll add that, what I love about doing the Mom to More podcast is that I am actively challenging that narrative by showcasing and celebrating women, not only 45 plus, but often 60 plus. And these women are just dynamos, right? They are wicked smart, spirited, navigating major life transitions and wildly succeeding. And so this, to me, is the image of the middle-aged and older woman that brands need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I agree. And you talk a lot about, the importance of that real representation then with all these women that you're speaking to on your podcast. Right. What are some of those most common stereotypes that you see brands falling into when they're trying to connect with women that are in midlife and older? And what should they be doing instead?
It's funny. It makes me think of when I was back in advertising, and some of those stereotypes still exist. And so I think all too often brands will reduce women over 45 or even over 55 or 60 to what I'll call outdated cliches, right? You've got the fragile retiree in pastels, ugh, or the anti-aging crusader who's obsessed with turning back time. Okay, so sometimes I'll admit that these are valid representations, but what's missing? I think the vibrant, complex reality of who we really are, right? Women in midlife are running businesses, running marathons, going back to school. We are launching second careers. We are just rediscovering our creativity and rediscovering so much about who we are. And also that we are still sexual creatures. So newsflash, older people have sex and we're not one dimensional and we're not done. And I'd also say, Sarah, that another common trap would be invisibility. And I think that trap is pretty common. Many brands simply ignore us altogether. They're still chasing that youth culture as the holy grail of marketing. I'm getting tired of that. Are you? But as you said, moms control over 85% of the household spending,
Yep.
right? It's pretty significant. It's a massively significant number. And we also influence multi-generational purchases.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to see ourselves represented not just in like anti-aging, anti-wrinkles, but in tech and fitness and fashion and entrepreneurship and finance. And I'd say real representation means showing older women as the dynamic, wise, funny, kick-ass, curious, and bold individuals that we are. And it's not so much a before and after story, but a story that is still unfolding.
Yeah, we're just evolving as human beings. Absolutely.
We are.
I know it's interesting you brought up fashion, and I bring up fashion catalogs, and I'm always curious why there's some brands that I know are targeting older women, but all the models are younger. When you look at it and you think,
that doesn't work.
Why are you doing that? Because I know
Right.
your target customer is at least 50. So why aren't you showing women who are 50? I know these women aren't 50 because I'm 45 and I know they look a lot younger than me. As just human beings in general, and especially with moms, I feel like our BS meter is extra attuned, right? Like we know if something's kind of off or feels weird, and we don't want anything that's going to make us feel worse about ourselves in any way either. But to your point, there's so much progression that's happening and growth that happens with the woman. I mean, I've heard that a lot of women really step into their own after they're in their 40s because finally they may feel more confident in their skin and in themselves than they did when they were younger. There's so many different scenarios of things that happen. Of course, that can happen in the reverse too, where they're not. I agree with you so much. I'm so passionate about what you're sharing because it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah.
And there's all these different stages and transitions and things. So I think this is a good segue because when you and I were talking before, you had brought up a lot of them that midlife and beyond women are going through. There's empty nesting, there's caregiving, maybe divorce, career shifts, which you mentioned. Any other ways and ideas that you have around how brands can better show up for women during these reinvention phases and really position themselves more as a supportive partner for these moms versus just like a product?
A much needed societal shift needs to happen where brands normalize what older women are capable of and what we are doing. So, for example, if a 25-year-old can start a business, well, surprise, guess what? So can a 55 or a 60-year-old. And I know so many women who are doing that. And also this whole, you just mentioned reinvention. It's not a one-size-fits-all journey. It is deeply personal. It is often messy. And it is always evolving, as you just said. We are evolving creatures. Women are so great at adaptation, and we've been doing it since our kids were born. And so now we have that time to go, oh, it's my turn now. And so you still evolve. And that is just the same as a 25 or 30-year-old, right? They're evolving into what they're going to become. We've already been there and done that. So we are now evolving, yet we have a lot more wisdom and more resilience and more lived experiences. And we also have a lot more financial security. So if brands want to see us as allies, they really need to stop talking at us and start walking with us, really walking in our shoes. And that means creating content and campaigns that speak to the emotional truth of this stage of life, the vulnerability, the grit, the hope, the humor, the wins and the losses, and also thinking that we're doing this at a later point in life. So oftentimes we are coming back to something that we've done before, or oftentimes charting an entirely new entrepreneurial path. That is something to be amplified and celebrated. So I would say, instead of assuming what we need, listen and discover what we really need, right? And don't you think this would be a great focus group topic?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. When I do like content marketing strategy,
Hmm.
my job, what I do outside of this podcast, that's a key thing always, guys, is whenever you're developing your plans and things to reach these moms is research. Of course, that's a big
Of course.
element of it. And you can start by just surveying your existing customers and thinking of creative ways that way. You can ask your employees, you can ask your sales teams.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways. We've had amazing AI companies that have come on, like Sooth, and talk about how they can quickly generate a lot of research to help give you those insights. But you're never going to get anything until you just start digging in and start doing that asking and getting that
Right.
information, because then you can better put yourself in her shoes, which is going to create a
Hmm.
lot more empathy and connection. And she's going to trust you a lot more, and you'll find your right type
Yeah.
of people that you want
Right.
and
And
that
so I'd
buy from
say
you.
let's highlight all of these real stories of real women navigating this very real phase of life. And it's interesting. That's exactly what I'm doing in the podcast. And it's not really like a one off token success story at all, but look at us as multifaceted humans in progress and show us building new dreams and not just bouncing back from something. And I'd also say that the brands that will win in this space are the ones that honestly say, we see you. We value where you've been. We're here for you and where you're going. And brands can really start to build brand loyalty with this audience if we see them as partners in these transitional phases of life. I'd also point out that most women in this age category can be very brand loyal because the reality is we have been testing and using these products for decades. And so they're not new to us. So some of the older, maybe more legacy brands. And I think also that brands need to remember that midlife women are not aging out, quite the opposite. We are powering up. And I believe
Mm.
brands should want to come along for that ride.
Powering
Woo!
up, I love it.
Yeah,
I love
let's
it,
go.
and I also it's a really excellent point you make about brand loyalty. Makes 100% sense, right, guys listening? Because I know I am, like, if I've tried something I really, really,
Mhm.
really like, I'm gonna stick with it. I have no desire to try out new trends or
Right.
things. If I
Right.
know I have something that I really like and it works, I'm like, "Great." To me, that
Mhm.
what's the most devastating thing, and maybe you're like this too, is when you have something you love and then they stop making it or selling
Yeah.
it and they change something, you're like, "What are you doing?"
Don't mess
So
with perfection,
oh my
right?
gosh,
Yeah.
but that brand
Yeah.
loyalty, oh gosh, you can tap into that so much in terms of how she's influencing and thinking about how you can better connect with her and relate to her to
Right.
to tap into that influence and grow it even more. And you mentioned stereotypes and cliches and things,
Mhm.
and I nobody wants to be a cliche. Older women definitely don't want to have cliches tied around them because generally the cliches around older women, they're not good.
I think it's high time that all that really changes.
Yeah, and how do we get more of this authentic storytelling that's really tapping into her and her power? So I'm curious, you talk to a lot of women on your Mom to More podcast. I'm curious if you could share an example of a brand that you see that's maybe doing this really well.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I actually, there's a few that come to mind in terms of
Okay.
brands I think are doing this really well. I'll start with Dove because I
Yep.
think they were really ahead of their time with the Real Beauty campaign,
Mm.
or maybe they were on time and everybody else is really late to the party. I think that's a really great example of respectful, inclusive storytelling that made women feel seen and not sold to because they were seeing themselves in the print ads and on TV and in all the materials. One of my favorite go-to brands is Athleta.
Yep.
And what I love about Athleta is they regularly feature women of all ages and all body types in their campaigns. And they're not just as models, but they're movers and leaders and change makers because they
Yeah.
highlight what these women are doing. And I love that because you're
Mhm.
getting a window into who this particular woman is. And that is so powerful. And it's super inspirational because you're thinking, well, if they can do it, I can do it too.
I
Yeah.
love their stuff, and I think, like, their
Mhm.
tagline's, like, "The power of she." When I get their catalog in the mail and look on their site, you're right, they always have such a variety of real people. They always
Yeah.
have interesting little stories about them and their backstory and what they're doing, and I find that so interesting to
And
learn
it
about them.
is.
It's real.
And it's super relatable.
Yep.
And that's what we look for. And I think maybe that's why, aside from the fact I love their clothes, since after the pandemic, we all like live and work out clothes. I
Yes.
just really like where they're coming from a marketing and relatability perspective. And another brand I think would be like Eileen Fisher. right? So this brand has long embraced older models and real women in its storytelling. And their message centers on things like sustainability and longevity and timeless style. And those are values that resonate with midlife women who don't want disposable fashion, right? So maybe what our 20 something kids are wearing. And it's chic without chasing trends. And it respects a lived experience with its audience. And also with Eileen Fisher, keeping up with changing shapes, they actually offer 3 signature fits that go from like slim to boxy, which really just addresses the diversity of women's bodies
Yeah.
as we get older. And I'd also say that these brands that we were just talking about, that they're not just selling us, but they are reflecting us. They are showing us another side of who we are. It's relatable, it's real. And when brands show up with authenticity and respect and the nuanced views of who we are and what we represent, not only do we feel that, but we remember. I think the older we get, you could say, I just didn't like the way brand X was portraying women, so I'm not really interested in buying their product. But if you have a brand that feels you, that gets you, you're more simpatico with it.
So these examples, so we have fashion, health, wellness, beauty care with Dove. And so it's interesting because I know you're also really big on strength training for
Mhm.
women over 40 and have some really great thoughts around this area too. And not just working out to look good. What's the real story that you think brands are missing when it comes to fitness and vitality and what midlife women really care about if we think about this umbrella under fitness and wellness?
Right. Such a good question. Yes, you're right, Sarah. I am all about strength training. I believe that it is the fountain of youth. And I know there's a lot of research out there that backs that up. It's not vanity, it's vibrancy. Fitness training is it's self-care and it's confidence and it's self-respect, and it delivers measurable benefits like increased bone density and better metabolism and mental clarity and sexual health again. And it speaks loudly to this demographic's desire to stay independent and active for many, many years. And what's interesting, I think strength training is really a powerful metaphor for reinvention, because you build muscle by showing up and doing the reps. And that's exactly what we're doing in midlife, right? We're showing up, we're doing the work, and we're getting better and stronger every day at whatever it is we are pursuing, in our next chapters. Oh, you'll find this really interesting. I recently started following this 71-year-old Australian grandmother
Okay.
who qualified for the World High Rocks Championship. And high rocks is a combination of running and all of these heavy lifting, pulling, toting, tossing
Wow.
exercise.
Okay.
It's amazing. Our son does it actually. And she has great muscles and she can toss and push and carry a ton of weight. And to me, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's beautiful. And it's also, you do that also to prevent injury, keeping your balance. You don't want to fall. You want to have a mood boost. Like, even though you may hate doing cardio, don't you feel so much better when you're done?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
mood boost. And we want to be physically strong to be able to take on whatever the next chapter in our life may be. And I think the brands also assume that women over, say, 55 or 60 are only interested in slowing down or aging or losing weight. And yes, while that may be true for some people, we're over here asking, whoa, wait a minute, how do I stay active? How do I stay vibrant? How do I stay engaged and independent for like the next 30, 40 years of our lives? And I would love to see a brand do something like a reverse engineer, where they're like, okay, how do you want to be at 90? And now 30, 40 years before that, what are you going to do to make sure that you see that vision of yourself at 90? And I thought brands could potentially be doing something like that and maybe following along with women over a year or 2 or 5 and see how that progresses. I know for me, like, I still want to be competitive Latin ballroom dancing as long as I can do it.
Do you do that right now?
Yeah, I do. I started competing almost 7 years ago. And for me,
Awesome.
going back to dance was
Uh-huh.
something that was part of my reinvention. Like, I put it aside for my kids and I
Mhm.
missed it terribly. And I went
Mhm.
back to to dance, which was more like jazz because I was a big jazz baby. And then I discovered Latin ballroom. And then I discovered that I could compete. So for me, I tend to be competitive with myself, right? How can I keep challenging myself? But there are so many women who have that mindset. And I think that's such a healthy, forward thinking, future looking mindset. And yeah, so I started competing about 7 years. I became a national champion one year in my age category and level. So you just keep,
Amazing. See, but such a great example. As we get older, we're not done. We're just
no,
like always looking, experiencing, and evolving and to different things, just like we were when we were younger. It's just we
exactly.
have more wisdom, more experience, more money when we're older. So
Exactly.
very influential for the brands listening as you're thinking about that. So I would invite everyone listening, obviously, if your product or service makes sense for the demographic we're talking about right now,
Mhm.
look at what you're doing. Are you speaking to them? Are there
Right.
opportunities to better speak to them, to also show them in your visuals? And think about, how do you know enough about them that you could talk to, as Sharon was saying, those specific things, like they want to be, all moms want to be seen. They want to be heard and understood. And that's how you sell your products and services more, by better
Right.
connecting with them and supporting them and helping solve their problems and giving them that success, giving them that win that they're looking for. And so
Mhm.
this is really insightful. Anything else, Sharon, that you would add that would be advice for helping brands think about and better sell their stuff to more moms?
I was doing a little research before we were talking, and according to the Behaviors Agency report, if you're not familiar with that, it is a comprehensive analysis of consumer behaviors, that we are making major changes to our buying patterns the older we get. Like 42% of us have changed our diets, 36% have shifted skincare. And this is far from what I'd call a stagnant demographic. I also say to marketers that we have evolved. We are all online. We would expect a blend of channels to get these messages to us. And I'd also say the younger generation, they do experience like experiential things.
Mhm.
And this older generation does too, even more than some of the younger age groups. And I think that really opens up creative and strategic opportunities, especially in like retail, tech, automotive, health, financial services. And I would say to a brand, if you miss these nuances, you're going to miss the market.
Can you expand on that by what you mean with the experiential with this market?
Like a car company, for
Uh-huh.
example, if maybe they are targeting you, if you live in a certain area and they know what your demographics are, maybe BMW or Mercedes or Audi, that they have these special events where you can come and yes, you test drive, but make more of a party around it. And maybe there's something like on a race course where you can like race that car and really get a feel of it. That to me is experiential.
Yeah.
Travel, there's a lot of opportunity to experience something maybe virtually before you take the plunge and go, okay, let's take that safari, for
Yeah.
example. So I think anything where you are physically there in person and you are gaining an experience that you otherwise wouldn't have. And that's where the creativity comes in for the marketers, having that opportunity to expand on how do we meet that potential consumer of our
Yeah.
brand? Like,
Yeah.
where do we go to do that? How do we think outside of the box
Yeah.
in terms of that?
The other thing that popped into my head as an example while you were talking
Hmm.
was, I think there's such a huge opportunity for brands to look into, if they're targeting certain local geographies, like these different communities that are like 55 plus communities where people are living and
Hmm.
prospering. For example, my husband and I were just having this conversation of, should we downsize? We were just thinking, and I started looking online at different houses and things around where we live. And I came upon this really nice one that was like a really nice house, but just like a smaller version of ours, which I was like, oh, that could be really nice. But it was for an age 55 plus community, which I'm still 10 years from. And my husband and I were
Right.
like, shoot, we're in our 40s. We can't live here yet. But I wonder, I don't know. I'm curious. That to me seems like, wow, that's like prime if there were collaborations with the homeowners association or something in that area, right? That you could offer experiences
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
value to residents. There's got to be a lot of stuff like that out there too, to
Hmm.
find communities of women and moms that are in in this age. But to your point, not always just going to the stereotypical cliche type ones, because you've
Right.
given some great examples of how varied, obviously, the interests are
We
with
are.
moms
The
in
other
this
thing I'd say
category.
is if they want to reach out, menopause is very much in the zeitgeist right now.
Mm-hmm.
There are people like Tamsin Fadal writing books, and there are podcasts, and there are literally like menopause events, like a conference where women would get together. Those are gold mines for reaching that demographic. Those are women that have more financial security. They can hop on a plane, they can fly to Scottsdale and go to a conference. And I would think those sorts of gatherings of women would be a really interesting place to try to make inroads and introduce your brand. And I just came where you and I met, the Mom 2.0 Summit in Orlando this year. Brands were there. They want to connect with us. And there's so many ways that they can do it where it's fun and inviting and invigorating and inclusive. And so that could be just another opportunity for marketers who are trying to think, how do we find these people all gathered together?
Exactly. And us meeting at the Mom 2.0 Summit, the observation was there was a lot of brands there that were for moms of younger kids. So I think there's such an opportunity for brands to think about, if you're targeting women with older kids, there's a big opportunity there to fill that need. Because I think a lot of times
Yeah.
with any kind of mom or parenting type of events, naturally the brands that target young babies and things like that are always going to jump on. But that's a great opportunity too to think outside that box if you're trying to sell to more moms and that in categories that they influence, which is pretty much most things. That's a huge opportunity for sure. I actually on the topic of menopause, I have an episode on this podcast, guys. If you're interested in digging out, if you didn't catch it, episode 151, I talked with an OBGYN and we went through all of the menopause and perimenopause like symptoms and cliches and just things that women are going through during those phases of her life and how brands can better support her as she's going through that. Great addition. Any other advice?
Brands that understand everything that you and I just talked about, where they speak to function, energy, and joy, and not to fear or fixing flaws, those are the brands that we would ultimately trust. And there's so much opportunity out there to connect with us because we are multidimensional human beings. We have been there, we've done that. We're wiser, we're stronger, we're grittier, we're more resilient. And those are all amazing life skills to have, all from Thank You Children, raising kids.
Amen. I love it. Okay, well, as we wrap up, tell us, how can people connect with you? Tell us more about your Mom to More podcast, all the things.
Oh, thank you. Everything is on my website, which is momtomore, momtomore.com. I invite listeners to join my community. You can listen to the podcast, which is on every platform. My main platform is Instagram, and you can find me there at Mom to More, also on Facebook, and also on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. I'll make sure I drop all of that into the show notes, guys, so that you can connect with Sharon if this resonated with you and you want to keep following to learn more.
Until next week, God bless.